You did everything they told you to do. You filled notebooks with every half-forgotten memory, sat in stillness until your legs lost feeling, and practiced forgiveness until old names tasted harmless on your tongue. You opened the closets of your mind, dragged each secret into daylight, and cleaned every festering wound with breathwork and discipline. For a while it felt as though you had finally arrived. Calm spread through your mornings. Your thoughts moved in orderly lines, and you whispered to yourself that you were healed. Then something unfamiliar happened. The noise inside you vanished and left only silence. It was not peace, not clarity, only a hollow stillness, a cold, empty room in your chest where something used to live. No fear or pain, yet also no joy, no hunger, no meaning. It was stillness smiling like life while feeling like death. You were no longer falling apart, but you were not fully alive either. You studied your reflection and saw someone composed and functional, though the spark behind the eyes had dulled. You answered messages, laughed at harmless jokes, kept up every routine, but underneath each gesture lay a quiet ache you could not name. Something felt missing, and the unsettling thought settled in that the missing piece might be you. No one warns you about this stretch of the path. Everyone insists healing is the prize, that if you repair the damage, happiness will return on its own. Carl Jung saw through that illusion. He understood that healing does not always lead to light. Sometimes it leads to emptiness. When the false self collapses and the shadow is dragged into daylight, you are not handed peace. You are handed space, and before space becomes freedom, it feels like death. So if you have done the work and still feel numb, if you have faced the darkness and now feel hollow, you are not broken. You are entering the chapter of healing most people never mention. It is here in the hush that Jung's darker truth begins to reveal itself. Modern self-help sells a polite lie, soothing, marketable, easy to swallow. It promises that healing is a destination, that once you release the past, raise your vibration, and meditate enough, you will arrive at bliss and remain there. The story is neat, the marketing is perfect, and the result keeps people buying. What if that sweetness never comes? What if you follow every instruction and still wake up hollow, still wonder what the point is, still sense something essential evaporated while you were busy improving yourself? Most self-help does not prepare you for what happens after relief because the product it sells is comfort, not consciousness, safety, not wholeness. Jung rejected comfort for its own sake. For him, healing was never about relief, it was about confrontation, not only with pain but with the very structure of identity. Here is the unsettling part. You can make peace with childhood, process trauma, forgive the people who hurt you, and still live a lie. Healing the wound does not guarantee that you have located the self buried beneath it. It simply means the pain is no longer screaming. When pain stops screaming, you may mistake the quiet for clarity. That can become a trap, the trap Jung called false integration. You think emotional relief equals inner transformation, confuse feeling better with being whole, and wear growth like a new costume. You learn how to manage life, to function, to keep plates spinning, but you have not yet faced the terrifying question. Who is the you that survived all this healing? What happens when the tools lose their magic, when rituals grow mechanical, when peace turns sterile and joy never quite lands? That is not failure. That is the threshold of something deeper, the cliff where many people turn back or choose to pretend they have already arrived. Jung refused to stop there. He stepped past the mirage and found not the end of suffering but the beginning of truth. Real healing, he believed, is not about escaping the darkness. It is about descending into it without losing your soul. If you feel lost, that might mean you have finally stepped onto the real path. They told you to face your shadow, and you did. You dug through memory, confronted rage, jealousy, guilt, and shame. You admitted things you had hidden for years. You peeled away the social mask and stared at what lived beneath it. For a brief instant there was clarity. You saw your darkness and it saw you in return. No filter, no denial, just truth meeting truth. What they do not tell you is what comes next. After the confrontation, after the catharsis, after the bright aha, when you finally name your demons, another process begins. You start to fall apart, not outwardly in dramatic ruin, but inwardly, quietly, like an old house realizing its beams are no longer sound. Once the shadow is exposed, the identity built to avoid it starts to dissolve. Jung defined the shadow as everything you have disowned, every trait, emotion, and instinct pushed aside so you could be accepted. The shadow is not merely darkness. It is your rejected wholeness. Facing it does not leave you feeling powerful. It leaves you feeling lost because reintegrating what you denied does not simply add strength. It erodes the false self. The personality you spent years perfecting, the role that once kept you safe, begins to tighten around your throat. Many people panic here because nobody explained that facing the shadow does not just uncover truth, it unravels identity. You thought you would emerge stronger, yet you feel disoriented. The old life no longer fits. Familiar friendships feel distant. Tidy explanations fail. It feels like a breakdown, yet collapse is not the enemy. Collapse is the initiation. Jung believed that to become whole the old self must shatter. Healing is not the art of polishing the mask. It is the act of destroying it. When the pieces start to crumble, you will feel hollow, not because you failed, but because you are finally making space for what was never allowed. This part of the process isn't shiny. It's not something you'll see in an Instagram post or hear about in a motivational reel. There are no affirmations that can soften it, no tricks to skip ahead. This is the part where the illusion dies. And like all deaths, it feels like failure at first. But that's the illusion too. So if shadow work has left you feeling like you're unraveling, like your insides no longer match your outsides, you're not broken. You're finally doing it for real. There's a strange kind of detachment that creeps in after healing. You're not as reactive anymore. The old wounds don't sting the way they used to. You've stopped chasing validation, and the patterns that once pulled you in feel boring now. And yet, despite all this growth, something still feels off. You find yourself going through the motions. Your conversations feel like lines from an old play. Your relationships, even the ones you used to treasure, feel thinner somehow, like a dream you can't fully return to. You're not broken. You're just different. Carl Jung predicted this exact phase. He called it the conflict between the persona and the self. The persona is the mask you wear in the world. It's not fake, but it's edited. It's who you've trained yourself to be to stay safe, be liked, succeed. The persona performs well. It earns approval. But it's not all of you. And when you heal, when you reclaim parts of yourself that you had buried to maintain the mask starts to fit wrong. It begins to itch. You start to smile when expected but feel hollow inside. You nod along in conversations that used to excite you, but now feel distant from the words leaving your mouth. And then comes the most unsettling part. You're no longer sure who you are. The mask has cracked, but the true self hasn't fully stepped through yet. You're stuck in a kind of limbo. Jung said the self isn't something you perform. It's something you become. But to become it, you have to let go of everything you're not. That means losing roles you once clung to, losing the labels that defined you, letting go of the image you spent years perfecting. And what's left in the beginning isn't a new identity. It's space, a terrifying, open silence where a self is still forming. You start to realize just how much of your life was a performance. Not out of dishonesty, but out of necessity. You became what was safe, what was praised, what was accepted. But now that the performance is breaking down, you can't unsee the truth. And the truth is, you were never fully there. That's why you feel detached. Not because something's wrong, but because you're no longer willing to betray yourself for the comfort of fitting in. You're not fake. You're unfinished. The detachment you're feeling isn't a failure. It's a separation, a growing distance between the person you were and the person you're becoming. It's disorienting, yes. Painful, yes. But it's sacred too. Because in that emptiness, something stirs. Not loudly, not clearly, but a quiet knowing begins to form. You're done performing. You're done pretending. You're ready to meet whatever truth is buried under all the masks. And just when you think you've found that truth, just when you believe you've cracked the code, something strange happens again. A kind of crash. It's not explosive or dramatic. It's slow, subtle, quiet. You start to feel hollow again. But this time, it's different. It's not the same hollow you felt before the healing. It's quieter, but more disturbing. as if the clarity you thought you had is starting to fade. You start asking yourself, am I slipping back? Was that peace just temporary? Why do I feel further away from myself again? This is the moment most people mistake for failure. But Jung had a name for it: psychic inflation. It's what happens when the ego tries to own the healing. You do the work, you face your darkness, and then the ego whispers, I've arrived. I've transcended. I'm whole now. But that's not integration. That's the ego slipping into a new costume, a spiritual costume, a wise costume, one that says all the right things but still needs to be in control. And when the ego realizes it's no longer at the center of your life, it fights back. Not with anger, but with emptiness. It lets you feel numb, lost, disoriented. Not because you're off track, but because the ego is losing its grip. And make no mistake, this is dangerous territory. This is where most people turn around. The emptiness feels unbearable. So they reach for the old roles again. The familiar distractions. The validation. They chase anything that makes them feel real again. But what they're really doing is rescuing the ego. Jung called this a psychic defense. The ego convinces you that peace without it isn't real. That silence is loss, not freedom. But if you can stay here, inside the silence, inside the discomfort, without making it mean you've failed, you'll start to see it differently. The numbness isn't the absence of life. It's the absence of illusion. It's the stillness that shows up when the ego stops talking. And yes, it feels like death. But it's not death. It's a beginning. The part of you that needed control is dissolving. And what replaces it isn't noise. It's presence. It's depth. It's truth. Not flashy, not loud, but unmistakably real. So if you feel hollow after healing, maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just ready. Ready to let something real take the place of everything that wasn't. There's a place on the other side of healing that almost no one talks about. It's not inspiring. It's not powerful. It doesn't feel like anything, really. It's called the dead zone. You wake up and feel blank. Not sad. Not happy. Just there. You're not overwhelmed anymore. But you're not moved either. Music doesn't hit the same. Books feel flat. Even your old distractions feel pointless. And worse, the things you used to care about don't land anymore. You look around at your life, the people, the plans, the work, and it all feels like someone else's dream, like you're watching it through glass. This is the part that scares people, because it doesn't feel like pain. It feels like absence, like your soul stepped out of the room and didn't leave a note. But Jung didn't romanticize this part of the journey. He called it what it is, a spiritual winter. The ego is collapsing. The self hasn't fully arrived. And so you're stuck in between. No longer who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. And in that gap, you feel emotionally dead. Most people run from it. They chase intensity. They look for a spark. They start something new. Or they blame themselves for not feeling more. Because at least pain means you're alive. But numbness? That feels like you're disappearing. Still, what if this isn't death? What if this is gestation? What if the stillness is not a problem to fix, but the space needed to begin again? The seed doesn't bloom the moment it breaks open. It sits in the dark, silent, hidden. It becomes. So do you. This isn't the collapse of your healing. It's the confirmation that it's working. Because something in you has been stripped bare. All the defenses, all the roles, all the urgency to be someone. And now there's just you, face to face with nothing. But that nothing isn't the end. It's the room being cleared for something new to take root. Jung once said that the path to wholeness doesn't always feel like growth. Sometimes it feels like dying. Not physical death, but the death of illusion. The death of urgency. The death of needing to be someone. So if you're in the part of the journey where everything feels empty, don't run from it. Don't fill it. Don't try to fix it. Let it be. Because this isn't your soul giving up. It's your soul rearranging you. And just like winter, this isn't the ending. It's the deep underground work, the preparation for spring. Stillness doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening in places you can't yet see. There's a lie that keeps circulating. That when you find your true self, it will feel good. That becoming whole will come with peace, joy, clarity. That once you've faced your darkness, you'll be rewarded with light. But Jung warned us, individuation is not joyful. It's brutal, because becoming whole doesn't mean becoming happy. It means becoming real. And real, when you've been living in illusion, hurts like hell. Individuation is the process of integrating every part of yourself you've rejected. Not just the wounds, but the rage you weren't allowed to express, the desires you were told to hide, the truths you were too afraid to say out loud. It means letting go of the roles you were praised for. It means mourning the identity you spent your whole life constructing. It means looking at everything you called your life and realizing how much of it was never truly you. And that realization doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like grief. You lose people. You lose comfort. You lose belonging in places that once felt like home. You sit in rooms that used to hold you and now feel foreign. You talk to friends who no longer know how to reach you. You try to go back to old routines, old jokes, old conversations, but they don't land anymore. They feel like trying on clothes that no longer fit. You thought awakening would feel like light pouring in. But it feels more like standing alone in a burned house, unsure what you can salvage. The deeper you go, the more you realize how little of your real self the world has ever seen. And how few people are ready to meet that version of you. This is the paradox of growth. You become stronger, but you feel weaker. You become more authentic, but you feel more alone. Not because something's wrong, but because you've stopped leaning on what isn't real. No more pretending. No more shrinking. No more performing. Jung believed that this collapse, this disorientation, this unraveling is not the detour. It is the path. The self, he said, is not something you find. It is something you forge. Through contradiction. Through pain. Through loss. So if it hurts, if your life feels like it's falling apart, if everything feels strange and hollow, it doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're finally in contact with what's real. You're not floating anymore. You're sinking into truth. And truth doesn't feel like comfort. It feels like chaos. First, we're taught that healing means becoming full again. But when you finally reach what Jung called wholeness, you don't feel full. You feel exposed. Because real healing doesn't build new armor. It removes the armor you had, piece by piece, layer by layer, until there's nothing left but you. And that version of you, it doesn't walk out glowing. It doesn't post quotes. It doesn't try to inspire anyone. It just sits, quiet, watching, waiting. And that silence, most people run from it. They think it's a problem. They think it's emptiness. But what they're feeling isn't lack. It's the absence of noise, the absence of illusion. It's what happens when all the pretending stops. You're not being praised anymore. You're not chasing anything. You're not hiding. You're just there, fully present, terrifyingly open. That openness feels like a void. But Jung would tell you, it's not a void, it's a clearing. What's missing isn't something vital. What's missing is the noise, the distraction, the masks, the performance.
And your ego.
It doesn't know how to live there. It interprets stillness as death. So it panics. It urges you to fill it, to fix it, to return to something, anything. But that's not healing. That's sabotage. Here's the paradox. When you finally feel the silence, when you finally sit in it long enough, something new begins. Not fireworks, not certainty, not joy, just something real. You start to feel moments of meaning again. Not loud, not grand, but real. The kind of meaning that grows like roots, not explosions. You feel it when you speak truth instead of performing. When you say no without guilt. When you sit alone and don't need to escape. And that meaning doesn't come from the outside. Not from applause. Not from validation. Comes from within. From the parts of you that suffered. That endured. That integrated. And just when you feel this meaning begin to form, the pain comes back. Not as trauma, but as a quiet ache. A reminder that you are alive again. That you are no longer hiding. That you are no longer numb. Most people mistake pain for a wrong turn. But Jung knew better. He believed pain wasn't the enemy. It was the compass. Not because suffering is noble, but because pain means you are moving through something real. You're not avoiding. You're not performing. You're becoming. And yes, that process hurts. Not because you're broken, but because you're growing out of the skin that once protected you. So when meaning starts to return, don't expect it to be joyful. Expect it to be quiet. Expect it to rise slowly through the places you thought were dead. And if it hurts as it grows, take that as proof. You're finally on the right path. Maybe you don't feel whole. Maybe you don't feel awakened or enlightened. Maybe all you feel is a strange stillness, a subtle emptiness, like something has left. But what if that emptiness is not your flaw, but your beginning? What if the silence is not failure, but the first true breath of becoming? What if what you're calling emptiness is actually space? And in that space, something sacred can finally begin. You're not broken. You're just becoming.